It's World Rapid 2021, and we've got a heavyweight clash. Bassem Amin with the white pieces takes on the legendary Fabiano Caruana, who answers with the solid French defense. White opts for a King's Indian attack setup. The opening is quiet and logical, with both sides developing their knights and claiming their share of the center. A classic strategic battle is brewing. Caruana develops his knight to c6, but this is a slight inaccuracy. It lets white get a comfortable position. The much stronger idea was to immediately challenge the center with pawn to c5, but Amin misses the chance to punish. There was a powerful way to seize the advantage here and put black under serious pressure. The best path was pawn pushes to e5, kicking the knight. The knight retreats to d7. White grabs the full center with pawn to d4. Black is forced to challenge with f6, and the bishop comes to b5 with a nasty pin. But in the game, white plays the quieter pawn to c3, and the opportunity is gone. The position is level again, both sides get their pieces out, castling to safety. Then Caruana strikes in the center with pawn to e5. This forces a trade of pawns and a knight recapture, clarifying the central tension. White's knight hops to c4, and the action shifts to the queen side. White pushes the a-pawn up the board to a5, and black calmly creates a barrier with pawn to a6. A period of complex maneuvering begins. Both players are improving their pieces, with Caruana's bishop making its way to h5 to put pressure on White's kingside structure. The tension continues to build. White's queen slides to b3, eyeing the queenside, while black prepares for action on the b-file. Both sides are probing, waiting for the right moment to strike. And here we go. White pushes the pawn to g4, a hugely provocative move that challenges black's bishop and dares Caruana to do something. And Caruana accepts the challenge with a brilliant sacrifice. The knight leaps to f warrior. What a move! The idea is to completely shatter White's kingside. After the bishop takes, black will recapture with the e-pawn, ripping open the e-file for the rook and creating a monster passed pawn. This is pure genius. Amin takes the bait. The bishop captures the knight on f4, and Caruana's plan is realized as the pawn recaptures, opening up the position. White's queen shifts to cu, and Caruana improves his rook to d8, preparing to feed more pieces into the attack. White makes a defensive error, dropping the bishop back to f1. This is too passive. The better defense was knight to d2 to control the center. Now black can ramp up the pressure with the powerful pawn push to f5, and the attack comes in waves. Caruana pushes his f-pawn, trading it to open the queen's path to the king side. The bishops are now staring daggers at the white king, and the pressure is immense. Caruana plays his bishop to h5, but this lets a little bit of the advantage slip. There was an even more crushing continuation. The most direct path to victory was queen to h5, threatening mate. The queen defends from e2. Now the bishop swings to d5, the rook moves to d2, and the bishop takes the knight on c4, wrecking White's structure. Back in the game, though, the bishop simply lands on h5, and while black is still much better, the knockout blow wasn't delivered. The pieces continue to dance. Caruana executes a beautiful knight maneuver, rerouting from e7 to the dominant d5 square. White's rooks try to coordinate, but black's pieces are just too active. Here, Caruana plays pawn to b5, an inaccuracy that complicates things unnecessarily. A calmer approach would have kept White completely tied down. The stronger move was the simple bishop to e8, preparing to regroup. White would try pawn to d4, but then queen to h5 comes with decisive threats. The knight hops to c5, and black can just trade rooks on e2. Instead of that clean win, the pawn rushes forward to b5, opening up the queen side for both sides. White captures the pawn on b6 with an en passant capture, but this is another mistake. It was better to capture normally with the pawn on a5, which would have kept the queen side more stable. Black recaptures the pawn, and after a few more moves, Caruana forces a queen trade on c2. We are now heading into an endgame where black is firmly in control, and White finds the only move. The rook takes the queen on c2. Any other recapture would have been losing on the spot, so this is a fantastic defensive find to stay in the game. The endgame begins. Caruana immediately places his rook on the open e-file, and then comes the monster knight to e3. This piece is an absolute octopus, paralyzing White's entire position, and that is the final mistake. White puts the knight on d3, but this is a fatal blunder that loses material. The only way to hold on was with a careful defensive move. The engine found rook to f2, guarding the back rank. Black would take the knight on e5. After the pawn recaptures, the rook would take the pawn on e5. And White's rook could snack on the a6 pawn, But after the move in the game, the knight lands on d3, and Caruana can now simply win the exchange with knight takes the rook on f1, and Caruana cashes in, taking the rook on f1. After the king recaptures, black's bishops slice across the board, culminating in a deadly check from h4. The white king is completely exposed. White finds another brilliant only move. The king steps to g1. This is the one and only square that doesn't lose immediately, a testament to Amin's defensive resourcefulness. Black's rook swings to e3 to increase the pressure, and white desperately sacrifices the knight on f4 to create some chaos. But Caruana is ice cold. He plays the bishop to g3, a fantastic move that ignores the sacrifice and finds the absolute best way to coordinate his attack. Just perfect precision, a last desperate check from the knight on g6. And once again, Caruana finds the only winning move, calmly stepping his king to h7. Any other move would have thrown away the win. Incredible accuracy under pressure. White brings the bishop back to f1, trying to build a fortress, but it's too late. Here comes the hammer blow. The rook infiltrates to e1, a crushing move that pins the bishop and signals the end is near. The white king shuffles over to g2, but there is simply nowhere to hide, and that's the decisive blow. The rook takes the bishop on f1, liquidating into a trivially winning position. A masterful conversion. The knight makes one last stand on e6, but it's a futile gesture. And the game ends with a brilliant firework. The bishop takes the knight on e6, a stunning sacrifice to deflect the king. After the recapture, black will deliver a decisive check. What a finish. White is forced to recapture the rook on f1, but then the bishop swoops in to h3 with a deadly check, and after the king moves to e2, the game is over. An absolutely spectacular performance by Caruana. A brilliant middle game sacrifice tore open the position, and he converted the endgame with flawless precision. In the end, Fabiano Caruana wins.